This is Bradford on Thursday, the 10th of April 1902, filmed from the front of a tram. This film was made by the early filmmakers Sagar Mitchell and James Kenyon. It's just one of hundreds of their films recently discovered in a cellar in Blackburn, Lancashire. The films were nearly lost forever. They take us to the world of the real Edwardians in a way our generation has never seen before. We will find out who these people were and what their lives were like. These films open a wonderful window into the lives of the men, women and children who appear in them. They show us how they had fun, how they played sport, how they relaxed, what they got up to on holiday. When Mitchell and Kenyon shot these films at the dawn of the 20th century, they captured the essence of the times. Industry was going at full pelt. People were in work and so had more money than ever before. For the first time, they actually went on holidays and had half a day off each Saturday. They even had spare cash to enjoy their leisure. Life in the cotton mills and industries about the country was looking up. It wasn't Mitchell and Kenyon's aim to make an historic record of Edwardian life. Moving film had only recently been invented. They weren't in it for the sake of art. They did it to entertain and to make a profit. This film shows a football match. Well, there's nothing to identify the teams, the date, the location of the game, beyond what I can glean on the image itself. The two teams, well, one has shirts with dark vertical stripes, whether they're blue, black is red, impossible to say. The other team has white shirts. Must be something here to inform me about what's going on. Ah, shot at goal. A save. Oh, yes. Goalie saves today. Absolutely charming. Now, oh my goodness me. Who is this huge goalie? The goalie on the other team with the vertical stripes. Huge fellow. Ah, oh, this is wonderful. He's taking a kick from goal. Here he goes, and he's running up. Oh, he almost fell over. No, he must have been a bit of a character. From the team's shirts, we can tell it's Sheffield United playing Bury, and the ground is unmistakably Sheffield's Bramall Lane. John Garrett's family have been watching Sheffield United from the club's earliest days, and he's an avid fan himself.
That would probably be the Cop side of the ground as we know it now, which would be behind the goal. My grandfather would have been sort of living in the vicinity of the ground and watching Sheffield United at this time. And it's interesting to think whether he'd be actually in the crowd here watching the game. Now that's looking at Bramall Lane as we see it now, and the houses down the side of the John Street ones. But there's some incredible players out here. Just to see them actually brought to life. I mean, these are people who, prior to this, have really just been in books for us. That's Wilkinson, I believe. That'd be Herbert Chapman just coming on the goal there. That's Needham, who's Sheffield United England's captain. That's wonderful. There's Fatty Folks. I like the way he hutches the trousers up there. That's brilliant, that. So it covers up to the just under the nipples there. Bang. William Henry Folk, to give him his proper name, or Folks, depending on which spelling you see. Really, when he signed for Sheffield United in 1894, was 6'2", which in those days was very, very tall for a man. And he weighed, we think, 12 stones in weight, which I'm told is about average sort of size-to-height ratio. But with the more success that came to Sheffield United, with the League Championship, with the first FA Cup, the more success that we brought, then the bigger Bill got. And I think his girth tended to increase with the success of the football club. By the time the clip we'd just seen in 1902, Bill, we think, would have weighed about 24 stones as his fighting weight. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that the nickname of Fatty Folks was well earned by that. But legend has it that although he was 24 stones in weight and 6'2" in height, he was as agile as a cat. If you're a centre forward or a striker and you're coming through on goal and you're suddenly confronted with what can only be described as a mountain in a football kit, it must have been an off-putting thing. I mean, imagine standing up as a football player and trying to take a penalty against anybody built like that. His penalty record was absolutely phenomenal, but it's such an intimidating figure.
Fatty Folks, whose bulk was such an issue, is responsible for one of the most famous football chants which is still used by fans today.
The chant of who ate all the pies is levelled at players out on the pitch who the away supporters think have probably piled a bit too much of the poundage on. Who ate all the pies? Who ate all the pies?
This scratchy, foggy film shows Burnley running out of the players' tunnel. But forget its quality, this film is a world exclusive. The second team is Manchester United. This is the first ever film of the most famous football club in the world. Mitchell and Kenyon filmed the match at Turf Moor, Burnley, on the 6th of December 1902. Manchester United are in their darker shirts, red as today. Burnley in lighter green, before they changed their famous claret and blue. Manchester United are playing in their very first season as Man U. They had been called Newton Heath, and had almost gone bankrupt the previous year. A rich local brewer rescued the club and nearly renamed it Manchester Central before this was rejected as sounding too much like a railway station. The film was meant to be shown at the Burnley Mechanics Institute that evening, but Manchester United won 2-0, so the film was suppressed. The showing cancelled. The film has never been seen by an audience until now. Films of over 100 games of football and rugby were found in those rusty basement canisters, including up-and-coming football clubs like Newcastle United, Bradford City and Preston North End. We managed to track down a Preston North Ender, George Harrison, who has a special interest in this film.
Is Wolverhampton coming out on their own? Usually both teams come out together. They do nowadays. Here we come, Preston. My granddad. Leading them out. But so it's a funny feeling to see a young granddad. Well, quite chuffed about that. Feel quite proud that he was my granddad. And, reach what he did do in football. I mean, he reached international status, which was a tremendous thing in them days.
George's grandfather, Peter McBride, is the man carrying the ball. He had been scouted from Ayr United as a young man, then happily settled for the rest of his life playing on Preston's Deepdale ground. Here he is playing Wolverhampton Wanderers on the 19th of November 1904.
Look, some young lads in that team. There's probably the directors in front there with their bowler hats and their dicky bow ties and whatnot. One thing you don't see now in a crowd at a football match, that's cigarette smoke drifting up from the ground. Obviously we know it's not allowed nowadays to be smoking on football grounds. Then we've got all the kids jumping up and down in front of the camera, everybody waving. None of the men that had moustaches in those days compared with now. Quite a lot. But mostly flat hats. Occasionally you get bowler hats. I don't know whether them were the better class people or not, but the flat hats were working class, mill workers and factory workers. Oh, that looks like it was a penalty.
The game ended in a 2-2 draw. For Mitchell and Kenyon, these films were hugely popular. There's always been money in sports filming. No surprise that they were soon outgrowing their shop in Blackburn. Not only were they busy making and selling their own films, they made extra money by developing and processing other people's films on the side. There was even a national film distribution network of sorts, giving them access to new markets. So in September 1901, they had to move from Mitchell's photographic shop to much bigger offices just around the corner with their own studio. They could now offer a selection of over 300 films for sale. The films covered an extraordinary range of local scenes. People rushing out of work, displays by the local fire brigade, agricultural shows, and this formal party in Nelson, Lancashire, which has turned out for an earth-shattering event. As Mitchell and Kenyon's film business was taking off, so did a new part of British life, leisure time. Sunday was, as ever, the day of rest. Here in West Park in Hull, it is a sunny Sunday in April, just after church. It is 12:30, and the congregation's gaily showing off their Sunday best. And what Sunday best it is! The women have fantastic floral arrangements on their hats, and all possible care has been lavished on the children. The rich could afford to dress up, but for poorer people their outfits might have spent all week in the pawn shop. On Friday evening, after receiving the week's pay, they would retrieve their smart clothes for the Sunday promenade. But as time off for holidays became more common, there was more and more calling for best clothes. Easter and Christmas were already religious holiday fixtures. Here in Preston, each Easter Monday the town's tradition, which continues to this day, was to roll hard-boiled eggs down the hill. In those days, instead of chocolate eggs, real ones were used. They were a symbol of rebirth and Christ's resurrection. But for most people, it was simply a great excuse for a party in the park. The man in the top hat throws his eggs in the air. But these girls hold tightly onto theirs. Even the baby in the pram is showing off her egg. The man who had thrown the eggs was a professional showman. He was amongst 30 or so entertainers who commissioned Mitchell and Kenyon to shoot or develop films for them. The most flamboyant and inventive showman of the lot was A.D. Thomas, seen directing a parade, then reaping the rewards. Mitchell and Kenyon were always on the lookout for new business opportunities, and in 1901, A.D. Thomas burst into their lives, ready to strike a deal for the two to develop his films. He had aspirations far greater than most showmen, so far in fact that he styled himself the Picture King, the mastermind of the world. A.D. Thomas then decided to masquerade as one of the most famous inventors of all time, Thomas Edison, who created the phonograph, electric light, and maybe even the movie camera. A.D. Thomas dreamt up all sorts of new ways of telling stories. For instance, the first action replay.
One popular film uncovered the great cricketing scandal of the year. It was made here at Old Trafford and starred one of the leading cricketers of the age, Arthur Mould.
He played for Lancashire and was one of the most feared bowlers in the country. We tracked down his granddaughter, Anne Neal.
I mean, to think that somebody filmed this all those years ago. You felt as though you wanted to go and say, "Hi, grandfather. You know, I'm your granddaughter."
Arthur Mould had an impressive career behind him. At the height of his success in 1894, he took 207 wickets for Lancashire. This day, the 11th of July, 1901, Lancashire played Somerset at Old Trafford. But it was no ordinary match. The umpire, an Australian called Jim Phillips, seen here coming off last in the Trilby, repeatedly no-balled Mould. Not once, but 5 times in one over, and 19 times in total before lunch. Phillips claimed Mould was chucking the ball rather than bowling it. The crowd came close to protesting.
Jim Phillips was saying that his arm wasn't upright and his arm was coming around throwing, and the others were saying it was, you know, a genuine action. The crowd was so in favour or for Arthur Mould, and they couldn't see anything wrong, and I think it was really getting to them that somebody could do this to just a cricketer they respected and everything else. Nasty little man.
A.D. Thomas immediately caught wind of the scandal unfolding at Old Trafford. He sent his film crew over and asked Mould and the famous batsman A.N. Hornby to reenact what had happened on the pitch. This bowling action to modern-day eyes looks suspect and too low. Mould's arm is not close to his ear, as it would be today. In fact, this was perfectly acceptable then. Until 1864, bowlers were not allowed to lift their arm above their shoulder. Mole's problem is that he's being accused of dropping his elbow, bowling with a crooked arm. It looks quite straight here.
In Arthur's case, I think he was not guilty. Proved by photographs, film.
The Manchester Evening News decided the most interesting pictures confirm that Mole's delivery is absolutely fair. There's absolutely no suspicion of throwing. Even though Mole was exonerated in the mind of the public, in private his family knew the whole affair had left its mark.
He'd had a great career. He'd taken so many wickets. It was, people always talked about the wickets Arthur Mole had taken. And then, at the very end, that an umpire should step forward and suddenly no-ball him at the end of his career. And I think it really saddened him. I mean, it's like a blot, isn't it? I could feel for him, really.
Birmingham University, like the other civic universities of Manchester, Sheffield and Bristol, was founded in a great wave of university expansion, opening up higher education to a broader range of people, including women. Till the turn of the century, women had been allowed to attend courses, but not to take degrees. Birmingham now joined the small handful of universities proudly making no distinction of sex.
In the Birmingham Daily Mail of Saturday, July the 6th, 1901, is an account of the first degree congregation of Birmingham University. It's a long account and rather fascinating. It says here, among the 10 waiting bachelors was one young lady, Miss Caroline Edith Morgan. Gosh, it says here, she looked charming in her white dress and bright scarlet tie, only partially hidden beneath her black gown with its flying strings. With a slight blush and a merry smile, the first girl graduate, that's in capitals, gosh, it's so patronising, of Birmingham University, mounted the steps and approached the Chancellor, who repeated the formula of admission amid the hearty plaudits of the great audience. One of the audacious students shouted the advice to kiss her, but the Chancellor discreetly ignored the somewhat disconcerting counsel.
The women's movement was on the march. Both middle-class and working-class women were pushing for work opportunities beyond teaching and caring. They were also demanding full political rights. The movement might have been split between the suffragettes and the suffragists. But all the activists, whatever their methods, dressed up in full Edwardian finery, flowery hats and flouncy dresses, to counter the accusation that feminists were unfeminine. There was still a large premium on female respectability. The Coventry Town Fathers used the annual Lady Godiva procession to boost their civic prestige. The medieval legend of Godiva rescuing the town by riding naked through the streets was reenacted each year. In the past, the parade of a seemingly naked woman had made the townsfolk gawp and leer. The London actress Vera Geddes was in the starring role. But this year the town fathers had made a bid at respectability by draping her in chiffon. Sagar Mitchell and James Kenyon decided they needed assistance to cope with the increasing workload. They were taught how to crank the film cameras by hand, judging the right speed and the right distance, a tricky procedure. Too slow, and the film would be too jerky. Too fast, and he used up too much film. This exuberant carnival procession and crew was in aid of their local hospital. In the time before the distractions of television and radio, an enormous amount of effort went into designing the amazing costumes, dances and routines. Look closely at these clog dancers. You will see they are all men. At carnival time for thousands of years, men became women, white became black, as the world was temporarily turned upside down. Next, around the corner, I came across this section of the march. The men are blacked up as both male and female gollywogs, doing a dance routine. This blacking up craze stemmed from American music hall traditions of so-called coons and nigger minstrels. But of course the British Empire was multiracial. Britain still ruled a quarter of the globe, and the British attitude to non-white races was one of superiority. Black people were seen as a more primitive race. The popular stereotypes portrayed them as natty, untrustworthy lady killers, or as bumbling, clownish idiots, good at music and dancing. Mitchell and Kenyon filmed such street processions all over the country. Fake African tribesmen in leopard skin tunics and black clowns in Accrington. Black men in kilts in Birkenhead. And a drainpipe band in Halifax. In all probability, people didn't think they were being racist when blacking up. For them, it was just innocent entertainment. Asians then were given more respect. Gandhi and Prince Ranji the cricketer studied in England. While these Indian sailors march alongside white servicemen in Liverpool on one of the most patriotic occasions of the year, Trafalgar Day. Ports like Bristol and Liverpool had always had a small black population since the slave trade. These three black men are coming off the commuter ferry on the Wirral. However, in most cities, black people were a tiny minority. This little black girl on the bottom seems only just to squeeze into the picture. This chap has clearly been asked by the showman in the top hat to join in the crowd. Mitchell and Kenyon might have been up to tricks. The black miner in this film has clean shirt sleeves. It looks like he hasn't been down the pit at all. To amuse the audience, the filmmakers may have placed a genuine black face, a fairground entertainer, amongst the blackened faces of the miners. The fairs are one of the few places where there are job opportunities for black people. So we went in search of someone who could tell us about fairground life in Mitchell and Kenyon's day for black and white alike.
In entertainment and fairground communities, there's no difficulty tracking people down, no need to go to the library or use a 1901 census. These are very close-knit communities with a strong sense of the history of fairground shows and families.
Celine Williams's family has been one of the most important on the fairground for generations.
You come on a fairground and you would see coloured people on the boxing booths. Sometimes you would find them working on the shows or on the rides. Nobody bad, there you are, look. There's a lot of black people. 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 There 2 rounds, nobody barred. So if you go 2 rounds in the ring and you come off the best man, that would be your reward. They were noted for being good fighters with the colours. There he's got the trumpet, blowing it to draw the crowds and draw the attention. There he's throwing a challenge out, you with me, look. Can you see he's pointing to himself? Here's another one rattling, 2 rattles. He's offering money, look at money in his hand. He's got boxing gloves. Can you see him throwing them up? Now, over his arm there.
The black boxer on the right, holding up the coin, is probably Bill Johnson, who landed in Liverpool from West Africa in 1897 and joined the fairground boxing booths to make money. But boxing was just one of the attractions of the fair.
That show there is what remains of my great-grandfather, Randall Williams's original show, first moving pictures on the fairgrounds. There's the traction engine that generated light. That's guess your weights. Best part of it would be brass and polished. And whoever's operating it would guess the person's weight. And if he was right, then, mind you, you had to, sometimes if it was a lady, you had to be a bit careful. Bostock and Wombwell's Menagerie. There you are, you can see the band there. There's his band. There's 2 live bears. Clowns. Here comes a tumbler. Watch him. There's a clown, look, tumbling. There's a fruit stall. Then you see he's putting salt and vinegar on. She's making cones, paper cones from the paper there. She's rolling it round her hand. He's filling them and selling them. It could be chips, but it looks more like small potatoes to me.
A.D. Thomas's shows had enjoyed huge popularity, but then it all went pear-shaped. It was expensive to hire public halls and buy cinematograph machines. It suddenly got too much. He overstretched himself. In April 1902, he was declared bankrupt. For 51 weeks a year, the coal pits, factories and cotton mills were busy. But each week in the summer, called Wakes Week, a different town would shut down for the greatest holiday of the year. Originally a one-day holiday of the local patron saint, by Mitchell and Kenyon's day, this is expanded to a whole week free. Factory owners gave no holiday pay. The right to paid holidays wasn't introduced till after the Second World War. So the week before, called Bull Week, all the workers had to work double shift to keep up productivity. Little surprise then, they looked so exhausted in these films. Mitchell and Kenyon rushed from one town to the next throughout the summer months, filming workers leaving their factories and handing out leaflets to let people know where the films were to be shown. When Wakes Week finally came along, Mitchell and Kenyon joined the holidaying throng as they took a train to the seaside.
Holidays were the new wonder of the age, and the most important resort for the north of Britain was Blackpool. What this meant is during the holiday season, entire towns transferred here, which meant that effectively you went on holiday with your neighbours. Some people came for one day, others who'd saved up lots of money would stay for the entire week. Blackpool was, I suppose, rather like Marbella and Alton Towers combined. Exotic, romantic, magical.
Blackpool was booming. Over 2.5 million visitors came within sight of the Blackpool Tower each year by 1901. Soon the promenade had to be extended. The sheer pressure of visitor numbers meant that widening it became inevitable. Builders used sand from the beach to broaden the road by 100 feet. Blackpool even then was seen as the most working class of the seaside resorts. It was unpretentious, with a huge number of pubs and many open-air amusements. Other resorts had different reputations. Next door, Lytham St Anne's was posher, while Southport was both religious and sedate. People flocked to the West Coast resorts in particular because these towns were accessible by the new train routes. City dwellers from neighbouring cotton towns and places far further afield could be transported to the sea in a couple of hours. Morecambe Bay was particularly popular with people from the other side of the Pennines because of the direct train routes from Bradford and Leeds. Morecambe became known as Bradford by the Sea. There are all sorts of entertainments, from the tasteful to the tasteless to the bizarre. Fortune-telling, waxworks, and two-headed mermaids in the less smart areas.
This film shows entertainments on Victoria Pier, Blackpool. There's a crowd gathering, chaps playing instruments. All looks very sedate. Ah, a poster. H. Flockton Foster. Entertainers 3 times daily. What's in store? Very smart crowd. Seaside clothes, but I say smart. They're formal ties and boaters. Ah, it's a kind of Gilbert and Sullivan number. Sort of naval attire. The girls are all moving together, the men are moving together, going backwards and forwards, round about each other. Oh my God, cartwheels, absolutely lovely. And the crowd are, sadly, half of them looking at the camera. Oh no, look, there's a chap here. What's he doing? He's collecting money in a hat. Must be working for Mr. Foster. Very, very cheery scene. There's a baby with a gigantic hat.
We managed to track down someone who could help us identify a member of Mr. Foster's troupe, Slim Ingram.
I think that is Arthur, third from the left. Yes, I'm sure. It's about the same size, the right height that he should be, and the age he should have been at that time. He would have been 16, 17. Yes, I'm sure that's Arthur. Sure of it.
Arthur was still treading the boards 50 years later when the young Slim Ingram came to be his manager.
We got on like a house on fire, we really did. You could compare him with any friend that you had. He was that sort of man. He was nice, he was shy, he was retiring, he never made a fuss of anything. These fellas, they worked very hard. 10 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and probably 7 o'clock at night again. Look at the crowd that was watching. All in the Sunday finery. Gentlemen in the bowler hats and ladies in their hats. And there's a bottler. You didn't pay for the entertainment. They used to come round and do a collection, which was called bottling. Some of the artists were better at bottling than others. North Pier, Blackpool. Look at the crowds on there. This was one of the things that was popular about piers. It let the ladies of the day in their floral hats and their long dresses and the bustles walk out to sea without getting on a boat. There was never any question of being seasick. And the gentleman, look at him with his top hat on and silk revers on his coat. and the boys and the children all smartly dressed, and it was a great thing to be together. They just kept walking and strolling about. No fighting, no nothing. Look at that lady with a cape on there. I think we always referred to that type of a hat as a cowpat hat that sat snugly on top of the head. But they had a lot of pleasure in coming to Blackpool, and they would do that day in and day out. Oh, look at that, it's a boy with his school cap on. He must have just passed something, and he's proud of what he's won. They were certainly coming to enjoy themselves. You have to remember that these people, this was the only break. They worked 51 weeks a year in cotton mills. That is the shot along the promenade now, which is there. The big wheel is no longer there. That's now on the central pier. And the building there is the Palace Theatre, which was a theatre, cinema and ballroom. And of course, adjoining it, just across a very narrow street, was the Blackpool Tower building, with the tower just to the right of it.
From those 2.5 million visitors in 1901 to 6 million visitors today, Blackpool still claims to be the largest tourist attraction in Britain. Our filmmakers, Sagar Mitchell and James Kenyon, had learnt to profit from this blossoming of leisure pastimes, physical activities and time off. They caught on screen the new vogue for athletics, the craze for cycling and all sorts of so-called sporting occasions. What the two filmmakers had unintentionally recorded was indeed a golden age. For working people, it was a time of innocence before the world wars, when life in industrial Britain was becoming less harsh and there were more freedoms. This Gilded Age had touched the partnership of Mitchell and Kenyon, cinematographers. By 1902, they were a well-established, thriving company, welcomed even into the higher reaches of Blackburn business society.
Mitchell and Kenyon had filmed the lives of thousands of working people who had more cash than ever before. For the first time, people could afford proper holidays and had leisure time to watch the new popular sports of rugby and football. And it looked as if Mitchell and Kenyon might become one of the most successful and important film companies in Britain.